the first thing we're going to do actually is we're going to have two sides to this discussion, to this scene, this little rap session we're going to have. The first is we're going to do some feedback on your experience with the users app, the experience you've had with it, what you like, what you don't like. So it's kind of like, an encounter session. And we will talk a little bit about what your experience has been. And then after about 30 minutes or so, maybe 45, because it's an hour and a half meeting, we will shift to mod user import specifically. So if you are, if you have opinions about mod user import or any of its alternatives, this is a place where we can kind of spec out what we want, in terms of mod user import. And so that's what we're going for in this meeting. That's the structure of the meeting. That's how it's going to go. So I'm going to start with some questions. How many people here have implemented already? Show of hands. Okay. Yes. Excellent. When it came to moving, like what system were you using when you moved to Folio? Were you using, well, I don't know what they are anymore. Is it Aleph? And well, I forget what the big name is, what the big dog is in the business now, but okay. So were you using Voyager? Okay. Yana, what were you using?
We are still using LBS from CRC.
Okay.
And so I kind of raised my hand here because we have implemented ERM only.
Right.
But users is of course part of the solution concept there, and
yes,
we also implement that stuff.
Yes. Okay. So you've got the so you're using LBS and you're using Folio for ERM. I'm just repeating this for the for the Zoom meeting. But users is definitely a part. And are you using Voyager or?
When I'm previously from Missouri State, I retired from here 6 weeks ago. I'm now working for EBSCO.
Congratulations.
At Missouri State, we were using Sierra.
Okay. Oh, Sierra. Nice. Okay. So we've got Missouri State using Sierra, and now you're working for EBSCO, but congratulations on retiring. So in terms of what you had, because we were working from Olay, and then prior to that we used Horizon, and Horizon was our very first real foray into permissions specific to users. And so Horizon had its own challenges, and we thought, thank God, we'll have Olay. And Olay had a completely different set of challenges. And now we have Folio, and Folio is, sort of its own thing. I do really enjoy, in terms of Folio, but that I'm gonna do the, nice, then my complaints, then nice again. But if you, Folio is just it. Number one, it's scaled nicely. We did not have we didn't have big problems with it. And using the APIs is definitely a very powerful thing to be able to do. I have definitely had a little trouble when it comes to finding where a thing is. There was a point where one of our programmers was absolutely furious because the UUID that denotes a user in the users app was not the same as the one as the user ID, or wasn't the ID in the permissions app. It was a user ID. And, he was absolutely furious that we did not have, that these things just didn't automatically map to each other. Why wouldn't they map to each other? It's crazy. And, it was easy enough to write around, but, it's sort of like when you discover that, when you discover that this thing that you thought you were going to do is going to be one thing, only you have to do other things beforehand. It's easy to get a little tetchy. And for me, when it comes to looking at users and this sort of thing, I don't often use the APIs right now because I'm trying to get people into the, accustomed to the notion that you can get what you want from the UI, so that I don't have people, just deciding to like run off the res and do whatever comes to mind, and nobody else knows about it. So that when they start talking about this thing isn't working and you have no idea what they're talking about. So I'm trying to set the example, and I will say that there's a heck of a lot of pointing and clicking involved if you want to do anything in Folio. And personally, I find that a little annoying. But on the other hand, it was so flexible out of the box, and I was so liking that. And that was a thing that Olay did not give me. It was a thing that Horizon didn't really give me. So that's the thing. It's like, it's powerful, it's flexible. I can connect these users to all these different places. Sometimes I wish I didn't need to talk to so many different places, but so when it comes to the users app, when it comes to doing users, in Folio versus using your old system, what were your feelings? What did you like? What did you hate? If you want to say just one or just the other, that's fine. Even if it's the same thing as I just said with, too much pointing and clicking, or, yeah, yes.
Very small screens. So
Yes, indeed. Yes. Yes. For those of us on Slack, Thomas just said that there's a lot of pointing and clicking, and the screens are kind of too small. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, in Voyager, this is.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a big improvement with Folio because you
Right.
didn't have to take up the entire screen with something like that. Rather alone history. Like a bad rendition of the Gene plan.
Right. You get what you ask for.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily get what you want. So yes, Yana.
So I totally agree about keeping the flow and everything. But what I liked is the links. Folio is full of links, and that is something that is missing from the system we are using right now. And I really love that the thought of the person who's sitting in front of the system. I mean, I feel so thought about it. So,
Yes.
and that is with the linking at this point. I think the users app is a good example of it.
Right. So a nice benefit is all of the linking that you can just, and is that a clickable link in the UI, or is it an API link? And just like when you use the API, you can use the user ID to get whatever you want out of loans or patron information or, renewals.
are you
Okay. Yeah.
Are you the PO for the permissions as well, or just for the use?
Oh, I am not a product owner.
No, you're not.
No. I just stand up here and look good.
Okay.
That's my job, because I am the SIG convener.
Okay.
And for some time, we didn't really have a PO, so I've just been kind of like, hi, let's talk about users. But
Because one
yeah.
of my frustrations is not specifically with the users, but with the permissions. the biggest issue is every once in a while you run into a situation where you try to do something and it doesn't work. And so you have to dig in to find out why it doesn't work. And it turns out that there's one sub permission that's missing. To find out that it's missing and then to figure out, because what's displayed on the screen, or not on the screen, when you look at developer tools, what's displayed there and what's displayed in Folio itself when you're trying to match them up are not the same. And you have to go through a whole lot of steps to get there. And I just end up guessing. If it's anywhere close, I click until I finally get, something that works. And then I go back and start taking away until I find what works. It shouldn't be that difficult. But that's more of a permissions issue than it is users.
Well, I agree. I very much agree. And permissions, we talk permissions in the user sig. So yes, the permissions are not always, just to restate your point, the permissions, there's no easy way to tell exactly what they do. And so, you're sort of looking at things and you just kind of like, you make a guess, somebody needs to do something and you're just making a guess. You just sort of like, well, this looks like it and this and this. And then is that too much? And you can ask the user, is that too much? And very rarely are you going to hear yes. But yes, and you have to sort of go through and, every one of those permissions that comes with Folio is a series of API calls. When we first started, the permissions that were out of the box did not have a list of API calls to go with them. And so someone from Duke did this huge listing out of what all of them did. But otherwise, what I would do is just I would take all of the APIs related to a module, all of the API calls related to a module and make it into a permission set and then upload it and then assign it to users. And I did that a lot. And it turns out that, what that means is that I would have to go through all the new API calls and all of the deprecated API calls with each new Flower release. And it was agreed that that was not the best use of my time. And so so I've been using the out of the box permissions. But at the same time, it would be nice to know what exactly they do. I did get, someone who was saying, I want this permission. I helped define it with my SIG. Please give it to me. And I'm like, that's great. What does it do? And he points me to the wiki page or the documentation where it says, this thing restates exactly that. Edit this. Well, it edits this. And it doesn't tell me anything about what it does. From the programmer's perspective, that is frustratingly vague. From the user's perspective, it sounds totally obvious. So yeah, I agree. Especially, I don't know if you've come across this, hidden permissions.
That's specifically the ones I've had the most trouble with.
Yes. Hidden permissions are so much fun. Because you don't know what's going to work and what's not going to work. And, in my case, I have a test instance, so thankfully I have a test instance Folio. I can make up a fake user and then grant them the person's permission, see if I can do what it is they need to do, then start work on the hidden permissions or whatever else to find, does this do what they need it to do? And, so it's not just adding it, it's also am I doing what I think they need to do? And so it's it's a whole other level of communication as far as I'm concerned. Yeah.
Dig for server logs.
Oh my
See,
goodness.
that's the fastest way. And in fact, actually, when we upgraded the copy, there's a weird permission that ended up showing up in inventory that I had to give everybody because they were getting errors, and it was a data import permission for settings or something of that nature. It seemed to be completely unrelated to inventory.
Right.
And I know that it was because they probably added another point in inventory that was according to a module over here that required that permission for them to see the information over here.
Right. Yeah, no, and to restate for Slack, or yeah, for Zoom, I'm sorry. That's, you have to, things are not working in Poppy. There's one inventory permission that is not working. And suddenly nobody can do a thing in inventory, a specific thing. And then you have to sort of like sift through and you discover a new permission that, where its label does not give you any idea that in fact it's going to, mess up everybody's access to the inventory. Which, I mean, why would I'm not going to ask why. That's not. Right. No, I do that sort of thing where I play because when I did tech support, I would always get people say, why is it doing that? And I would have to say, I don't answer the why questions. I only answer the what and the how. And if they tried it again, I would say, why do bad things happen to good people? I don't know. Why did it happen? I don't know. And I would just have to leave it at that. So yes, I agree. That's definitely a thing that if we can have something in Folio that would tell us like, oh, by the way, this new permission touches these other things. If there was some kind of way that, we would say this interacts with this other app. And, that would be, it's sort of a documentation issue, but it's one that's so very granular that I don't know if anybody is even willing to take it on, because it's it can really kind of make you cross-eyed.
Even if they trickle up, like we have access to our logs through Elasticsearch. So all of our server logs get dumped in Elasticsearch. So we're going and actually look and see what an error is, and it'll say specifically that like this permission denied or denied because of this permission. If they could even trickle up into the UI,
Yeah,
something like that happens, even if it was in settings, you can go in and see permission errors on
Right.
users. This user had this permission error, so you knew exactly what. I would love to be able to see logs. Yeah.
yes. Well,
I don't know how we got a hold of them. I'm not going to get for some. We're still getting them, so.
well, I think it's a great idea to have. Yeah. I think it's a great idea to be able to take your server logs and put them into Elasticsearch. That sounds like the best thing ever. Because we have access, if we have a local thing, we can look at the thing. We can look at local logs, and what you have to look for is a timestamp. We had to do that with Olay a lot. And I just kind of wish that we could have had other things. Would have been nice. But alas, it is not there. I do also appreciate the developer tools that are sort of packed into the browser that allow us to sort of figure out, oh, it's this thing. But definitely something in the UI that says, there's a problem here, missing this permission, or even missing this API call. Because then, if you have a way of looking through the permissions to find which API calls, then, you've narrowed it down a great deal.
Yeah, all the logs are tagged for notifications, errors, and that sort of thing. So,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I don't know how much of a task it would be to trickle that out to somewhere in the UI.
Yeah.
And when you can do permissions to be everything.
Yeah.
Like if there's an error, and it's just like the Windows console, you can go in and see all the errors for the system. There's an admin console Folio, you could go in and see errors trickle out. Now, yeah.
That would be
It'd
nice.
dangerous who we give it to. Nice to say there. Don't worry about it. But it says don't worry about it. It's okay. Don't ask why.
Right, exactly. But why did it happen? Nope, no whys.
Blame the gremlins.
Yes, exactly. do you know why it happened? Because that's why. And we'll just, live with it from there. But yes, I think that's also is an excellent idea. So that we can, sort of pull these things upward, because they exist in the logs. There is no reason why we shouldn't be able to see them. Provided, of course, the person who sees them is trusted. So I agree with that one myself. Okay, so is there anything else that comes up? Or because if not, then we'll shift over to mod user import.
The only thing for us, and I know it's been mentioned a few times from other people, it's the search functionality in user system.
Oh, yeah.
The one that other thing that, and this is very odd and an edge case, and it's maybe it is custom user fields.
Oh,
So I use them. We use them for storing data from our previous LS.
okay.
So we like the old Voyager IDs and that sort of thing, storing that. So when we're making reports, we can link up stuff. But I've recently added a new one for tracking whether or not they have an active. And the way the data comes through the API, even though I said there should be a true or false value, it comes back as option 1, option 2.
Oh, for gosh.
And it doesn't backfill the data. So I said the default value should be true. It doesn't backfill all the user records. It just
For each of the ones that you load?
only the ones I edit.
Oh, for God's sake.
If you don't edit it, it really keeps the field empty. So those are kind of, as I said, it's an edge sort of.
Yeah. Well, I mean, okay, so we're talking about custom fields, which, the user management thing has been very into custom fields, user custom fields, being able to use them, being able to search by them, being able to, use them to create a batch that we can edit with. And, even just getting a count, how many people, have a true value in this custom field. Is it an import from the bursar's office or?
Our main feature feed comes from a combination, it actually comes from our central IT office. It's a combination of the bursar's office and people's office.
Okay.
So they mash the data from both of them and send it to us. This custom, they don't touch the custom field stuff.
Right.
The custom field is one that I'm editing manually as I hear back from the bursar's office on processing fines.
Okay.
I can just say this person is no longer active, and I go back. Turn them off.
Right. Okay. Yes, that's so to restate for the Zoomers, we're talking about the fact that you have essentially you get information on patrons through a mixture from central IT and PeopleSoft, and that gets loaded in. And if somebody has and you want to be able to use a custom field to say whether or not this person is active, or at least has an active bursar account.
Right.
And I don't know if that corresponds to the active click box, the active inactive click box.
They're separate.
They are separate.
Yes. So it is possible. It sometimes happens with graduate students, but because active inactive is black and white, and my bursar's office and PeopleSoft is gray.
Yes.
You get the patrons that are technically not enrolled in classes, but they are still an active member of the community because they're finishing a dissertation.
Right.
Or they're on leave. So they will remain active in our system as a patron, but they won't have an active bursar account that we can charge fines to.
Okay.
So that's where the distinction has to come in between the two.
Okay. Right. So some people can be patrons without being able to get fines, which sounds like a heck of a dodge to me.
We still get them somehow.
You're Cornell, right? Ithaca's not that big.
Exactly. There's a guy named Bruno.
We don't talk about Bruno. Being able to, for instance, get information from the from say Campus IT and or PeopleSoft, not sure which, that would automatically populate that custom field, that you would be able to map that data to a custom field?
They could do that now.
Oh,
There's issues on their side that there's an issue on their side why they can't do it. They could do it, but
mhm.
sorting out the data on their end is impossible. So it's weird.
Okay, so they can't sort the data, you can.
Yes.
Okay.
And it's not, primarily it's reactive. So
Okay.
I will process, find fees, send to the bursar's office. The bursar office will send me back the report saying this patron is no longer active. And I have
Okay.
to go and make it. It's like one every month or so.
Okay,
But the problem is you're saying like with reporting, because I can't run a report and say, of this patron group who has a active bursar account, because
Right.
there's no data for them.
right, and their expiration date or whatever is not, it's not gonna work.
Correct.
Yeah, so basically it would be really nice if you could take the information that you get from the bursar's office and be able to just automatically populate it into that custom field.
Yeah.
And that would automatically, I don't know, deactivate the account or something.
Or just backfill the information that's there. So like
Yeah.
when I set up a custom field and say the default is true, it backfills every single user account with the custom field value of true.
Right,
And then actually uses the custom field value as the value returned in the API. Instead of option 1, option 2.
correct.
Reporting had fun with that one. It's like, wait, I think it's true or false. It is true or false, but this is how it comes through. Yeah, I see the report on this.
Right, there is no reporting on true and false. So you couldn't get that because it comes through as option 1, option 2 in Folio.
Yeah.
And so that's, that's that's less than ideal.
Around that. But
How?
I hate the way I had to do it.
What did you do, Mark?
Well, I had to use the APIs to grab the custom field information and basically reverse it.
Yeah.
And so now I said, okay, option 1 is true. So now I can map the true, but in order to use that API, you actually have to, I had to change some of my data gathering stuff because in order to use that, to grab the custom users, you actually have to send something in the header, not just as a parameter. And so it really made things
Right,
a lot more complex.
right. So you use the API to work around this,
Yeah, yes.
but you couldn't make it a parameter like ordinarily one would. Instead, it had to be put in the headers.
To grab the custom fields,
Yeah.
there is an API call,
Mm-hmm.
but you have to, and this is what makes it even more difficult. You have to know the module version in order to use it.
Hmm.
And so you first have to query to find the module user, the module version. I have to look at my code again. You have to find the module version. Once you find the module version, then you have to use that and you send that, I believe, as it's part of the header back to Folio so that you can get then your custom fields. And so now you know what option 1 and option 2 is. And then from that, I say, okay, I got this value, I can map that to option 1 or option 2. So it is doable, but it's highly complex.
It sounds almost like when as they progress with custom field code, they were changing the way the data was mapped on the user records. So the module version is required because if it's this module uses this pattern for saving the data, if it's this module uses this pattern for saving the data.
They did it because when they first came up with custom fields, it was only for user data, so it didn't matter.
Right.
But they want to use it for other modules as well. And so you have to send it back and say it's for this module, but it's not just for this module, it's for this version of this module. And so every time there's a, you know, even a minor patch, if it changes the version, it all breaks. And I didn't want to have to deal with that. And so first I have to find the version number of the module. Fortunately, there is a way to do that. And then I can get my custom fields and work from there, but it's more complex.
So again, for the Zoomers, what you did in order to work around it, you know, it's easy enough to use the API to get at custom fields, but because of how custom fields have been developed, you have to have the right module number. And I'm guessing the current module number that you're using, you know, in your current system. It's not just like anything later than this module number. You have to.
There's no wild card.
Oh, great. No wild cards for that kind of thing.
5.91, it has to be 5.91.
Right,
So,
right.
I mean, how I found it is I set it up for my test system. And it was in slightly different version than my production. And I moved it to production, it blew up.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like, okay,
Right.
I started out hard coding it. And it's like, this is not sustainable.
Right, right. And you know, just having to know the module number, having to be able to find it and put it into the code. You know, and is that what had to be sent in the headers, or was that something you had to do before you sent the update?
I have to look at the code. It's
That's
been a few
okay.
months since I looked at it, but
Right. Well, you're retired now.
I can't remember which call it was, but I think it was the call to actually get the custom code, you had to have module number in the header. I think that's right.
So in order to get the custom codes at all,
I
the custom fields,
think that's right.
okay. And that is any custom field.
It's in the API,
Right.
API documentation.
Okay.
You can find it there.
All right. Yeah. But it does sound like a giant pain in the butt.
It is.
And it is.
I don't, unless they're changing the data structure, why would the model number do it?
Because the data structure can change.
Right.
Custom fields, how many can you have now?
They originally said like 17, but in theory, they put no hard limit.
You see, I thought it was 4.
Yeah, and then they were like, you can have 17, and then apparently they have no actual hard limit on custom fields.
So something has changed. Right.
Well, I have a feeling that, like, I don't know if they actually ever enforced the limit. They said, you know, sort of human engineering.
I always
You
thought it
know.
was 4, and so I worked with that. I was
Yeah.
old knowledge.
Well, you know, they, you know, it's a sort of, you know, you have to be in the know. You have to know the right people.
The custom field data it's stored on the user record, or is it stored separately?
No, it's stored on user record. Hey,
And it,
I believe they are. I believe custom fields are stored in the user record.
the data
right,
is stored on the user,
yeah, the values.
but the construction of the user of the custom fields is stored elsewhere.
Isn't that stored in settings?
That's where you set it up.
Okay,
I don't
yeah.
know. I don't remember the endpoint. to
Right.
get to it.
So the data is in the module users,
Yeah,
and then
it's up
the-
one,
the
up
actual-
two.
right,
That's in the
right.
user's module.
and then the actual data structure related to it
The definition
somewhere else.
is somewhere else.
Right,
It says op one means true.
right,
That's-
right.
That seems counterintuitive to other apps. Like my understanding of the Notes app is that the settings and the note data is stored within the Notes app. And then it's just linked to from like users or wherever. Or in this, the custom field data, the settings are stored in the app, but the actual data is stored on the original entity. Which means you have this really weird deep linking between
Well.
modules.
Right. Well, and it could be that you know, that Notes has sidestepped this problem because they saw what users was doing and thought it was a bad idea. And it could also be that you know, users was the first. And so it could be where we made all our mistakes, or at least our first set of them. And so, you know, well, Notes has gotten to the point where they can they can sidestep the, they've managed to take the data and the structure and put them all in the same place. Users didn't do that. And so that might be something that needs to be sort of like folded together with the users app in order to make it kind of work better. Which I would, personally, I'm in favor. I like things that make sense. That's usually my way. Although usually, if I have 40% of what I need to solve a problem, the universe isn't trying. So yes, given that, we can move on to a discussion of mod user import. Basically what happened was that someone else said they wanted to see a session on mod user import. And then when this thing was set up, and I was like, hey, here it is. They were like, oh, I'm already in another session at that time. So I took.
That's why I'm here.
Okay, yes. And so I took, I asked for like an outline of, yes. So as an outline, using this as sort of an outline of, I used I asked him to give me an outline of what he was complaining about. And we can see if you guys have, if you agree with it or disagree with it, or how this would be changed. So yeah, thank you.
I'll be a Brent, say it right off the bat, our IT department, I asked them about using mod user imports, and the response I got back was no.
Well,
I got the response back.
Right.
Don't ask why.
Right. You're not allowed to ask why.
It was one sentence, because it was right after a big update, and we ran into an issue because we were using APIs, that if there's not a empty user permission record, it was causing errors in the system. So I was asking, oh, are you using APIs or using mod user import? He said, I'm using APIs directly. I'm like, well, there is this, and it does this. I'm not using that.
So that's the that was it. You talked to IT and they said no.
Exactly.
And they were complaining, and you said, well, there's this other thing. You don't have to use the APIs directly. You can use this import. And he was nope.
Nope.
And absolutely, absolutely.
I didn't trust it.
Right. Yes. Okay, so I put a name here, which may or may not be the person making these slides, but I want to know if people have used mod user import. Again, show of hands for people who have used it at least once. All right, good. Apparently, mod user import can't load a lot of records at once, like in one batch. So the limit appears to be 200 to 500 records a piece. Is that true for people who've done it?
I was loading 1,000.
Oh, so Mark was loading 1,000 at a time. Okay, so this might be something that Brooks here had an issue with, and then abandoned mod user import, and just decided that this. I've seen a couple of these things where so have you we have thousands of users. When I have to renew books for people, it's 45,000 at a time. So the renewals API does have its own limits, I can tell you. But I don't personally do a lot with mod user import, and our programmer uses a batch import. I think he uses mod user import in a batch style, but I'm not sure, because some people are just not that communicative. So I'm going to say that this may have been a problem early on, or it might be a specific problem, but that is not the experience of people here. So just move on.
I was gonna ask Mark, do you know any more about the context of what Bruce is talking about
I
here?
don't
You don't?
talk to him about it.
Yeah, I was just thinking in relation to he's presenting on the Folio migration tools that we use at EBSCO right now. I was
Right.
wondering if that's in the context of those tools, if it's maybe like a tool thing or it's an API thing, I guess.
Oh. Yeah, it might be part of the Folio migration tools.
Yeah, good.
And, in which case, just loading through mod user import directly or not using one of the tools might be a completely different issue.
And then when you were reporting 1,000 users, was it updates and new users, or was it just, the users?
Mod user import
Upsert.
doesn't care. Yeah, it's an upsert, basically,
Right.
yeah. But now, sometimes they would run into timeout errors. But I made my tool so that if it timed out, it would back off and say, okay, that didn't work at 30 seconds, so I'll do it again and try 45 seconds. And so it would keep going until it actually got it, or until it ran out the maximum number of retries. It may be that this timing is just set too short.
So yeah, it could be just the fact that he's getting timeout errors. And that,
No, I was agreeing. Yeah. Yeah, I
okay.
was like, that
So it could be how this was set up. He
I
could
was
be-
having, interestingly enough, I wasn't having any trouble loading users. I've been loading them for a year and a half with no problems. We upgraded to the next Flower version, and suddenly I started having all kinds of trouble. Something was different, something was slower. And so I had to change my tooling so that I could either just change the timeout and make it larger, but it was more fun to figure out a way to let it choose its own time.
I do the easy way when you follow it, right?
Exactly.
That was my
Right.
mentality.
Yes. Why would you just up the timeout for everybody, for every record, when you could conceivably just make it stop and think about it and, try again.
That's why, and not tweets.
That's right. This is IT we're talking about here. It was also reported that error reporting appears to be spurious, reporting errors that loaded or were updated properly. And that if there were too many error messages, the module became unresponsive and needed to be restarted. And again, I'm going to ask if anybody has tried this and if anybody has noticed this, because both of those things seem kind of the sort of thing where, as a SIG, we would really want to advocate for not having that happen. If we have errors for records that, upserted properly, what's the error? What's the problem? And, does it matter if the user record is fine? Once this thing is done, then what is the error and do we care? And, part of it is that I see that if there are too many error messages, and if we're getting error messages for records that load correctly, and we get too many error messages, then the module becomes unresponsive and you actually have to go to the module and restart it. And so I'm going to ask, has this been anybody's experience with mod user import or with any other form of user loading? Okay, so far we haven't gotten anybody else with the same experience. And that will, but if it happens, I'd love to see it. Because it's been too long since I, as not product owner of user management SIG, have tied a bandana around my head and demanded some kind of thing. I advocate for things. I don't really do that, but I like to think of myself as being a little more dynamic than that. So this one states that, a username is required. Every user that is loaded has to have a username. There is a closed ticket for this that states it was fixed in Juniper. And, you know, the question then is, does it do what we need? Do we, you know, has anybody loaded, records without a username? And, you know, you've got your first name, you've got your last name, you've got, you know, your preferred name, but you don't have a username. Is that something that we've seen? Is it something that we want?
No, I said we don't use the batch import function, but we either break down. A username is required. If it doesn't, if there's an error, we use only if there's an error. If it's a duplicate external ID, it also the API is also built there. So username is required field. It has to be unique. Barcode has to be unique, and external ID has to have a code.
Okay, so that's and again for the Zoomers, this is a when you use the batch API, you can you know, these things can load, but they have to have a username. The username needs to be unique. It needs to have a barcode. The barcode needs to be unique, and it needs an external system ID. Does that need to be unique?
Yes.
Okay.
It's usually it's like the same as the barcode. So
It's
Yeah.
usually used to look into your SSO, and so
Right,
it has to be unique or your SSO would work.
right. Yes, it does. If it hits, if you're using that external system ID to hook into your SSO, then absolutely it would have to be.
The way I got around it is my process actually looked to see if the username was there. And if it wasn't there, I kicked it out. It never made it into the load. I kicked out an error before it got there.
Right.
It did the same thing with like duplicates. If it was a duplicate, I never loaded it into Folio. I had a report that kicked out beforehand that said this is a problem and you need to fix it.
So you did some pre-processing, a lot of it. And in this case, you checked to see if it was present and if it was unique. And that makes total sense. It would be nice if the import thing could handle that without us having to do the pre-processing.
I wrote the initial module 3 years ago.
Mhm.
So it could be that I'm testing for things that are no longer constraints. But it worked, and you know.
It worked, and that's what mattered 3 years ago. Yes.
actually, this question is with the batch import function, what is it matching on to decide whether or not it's an update or like is it the external ID, the username? Do they know?
That's a good question. I'm going to repeat it for the Zoomers just for a second. But when you're doing a batch import and you're looking for these fields, what does it match on to create a new field or to update or create a new record or update?
I don't know what the code says, but I think it's username, which is probably why it's required.
Excellent.
We use username, our SSO field is actually the username field. We use that for our SSO. Okay. And I know that's what CIT is using for mapping their data, because when we end up with issues is that for some reason their net ID might change. And it's usually weird implements. I'm not sure if they got a temp one or they're using their status the manager. So their username will change, which will trigger a create new user record Folio from that process. But they still have the same ID card. So they have the same barcode, which then kicks back an error from Folio saying, this is a duplicate barcode. And then I have to go in and edit the barcode, change the external ID, save the record, close it out, and then kick off the process again.
So wait, does the entire import stop?
Yes. Yes. As soon as our import hits an error, it will stop in its tracks there. And then it will send an email to like 4 or 5 different people on one of them. And until that process is manually kicked off or started the next day, it will not run again. And then every error it hits after that, it just send out another email. Most of the time, we just had our large influx of freshmen this week. I had fixed 5 accounts over the past week. So it's pretty good. But it's also because of the way they do the pre-processing. So they actually pull the UIDs for all patron groups, departments, and all that information out of Folio, store it locally, build the data on their side, and then push it in from their side that way, which is one of the unfortunate things internally. So.
One useful tool that we don't have that would be nice to have, Sierra had this, the ability to merge 2 user records. Because every once in a while we'll have an issue. It's usually because somebody went in to create an on-the-fly record and they didn't get everything in the right spot. When the new one gets loaded, it doesn't override it. And so, and usually they do an on-the-fly record because somebody wants to check something out.
Yeah.
So I need to merge the 2 records. I would love to have a UI tool that would allow me to merge them instead of having to go in and do it by hand. So you can have a
Indeed.
list of things to do.
Yes, 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 the list of things we need to do is, and that one makes a lot of sense. If, again, for the Zoomers, if we're making if someone makes a record, just makes up a record so someone can check something out before their load, before they come through in the user load. We need to be able to take the more complete and more canonical user record and, merge it with the on-the-fly one that was created specifically so they could check something out.
And sometimes it's more of just even the circulation transactions or a bind V transaction might be in one record and the other one you kind of use linking between them. One thing, and I've been always on the fence with this, Voyager allowed multiple barcodes on a user record. There could only be one active barcode at a time, but it did allow us to kind of see when we had a patron come in that said they were a graduate student, but they were coming into staff. We could go in and say, oh, you had a graduate student barcode, but it was deactivated on this day. Where with Folio, it's one barcode, one patron type, that's it. And I've been always kind of on the fence, like, which is better? Which is nicer to have.
Right, sort of the, if you're, if you've got, these different kinds of sort of credentials or patron groups that you can sort of like, you get this ID and it's your graduate school ID and you walk in and you can check books out and then suddenly you become staff. This ID you have in your hand is no good. And, congratulations, you probably got your doctorate or whatever, but it also means that, you can't just walk in with that ID. You'd have to get a new one. So you have to have 2 IDs. Now, my first question is, what if you have a graduate student who is also staff?
It's kind of like that mapping in PeopleSoft and then the mapping that it goes through, they can only do one thing. So we have a staff degree program. So as a staff member, I could get a PhD, and technically I am in graduate school. I may be a graduate student, but the way I would map the Folio is a staff member. So
Yes, and I bet those are 2 different patron groups too.
there are 2 different patron groups, and in some libraries, graduate students get other privileges that even staff don't get. So specific study rooms, different things of that nature. But then on the staff side, you get a long period. We have gotten some, but Voyager didn't do that either. Well, Voyager, it was either you were with this group, or this group. We could see if somebody was a graduate student, moved to staff, or jumped back to graduate. But they couldn't have 2 active patrons at the same time.
So essentially what you had was a history, and that you could take, this person had been a graduate student, then they became staff, then they became a graduate student again, and that you could flop them back and forth,
Kind of.
The old is the new and the new is the old and back again. Which is something that Folio is like, no, you have one barcode. One barcode to bind them in the dark and rule them all. And if you have to, if you lose your ID and you have to get a new barcode, well, too bad, you lose the old barcode. And I presume that just by editing the barcode, it doesn't mean that you lose your loan records. It doesn't. Okay, good.
Yeah, you can change a barcode. In fact, that's actually one of the things that the loan process does, is that it matches up the ID and we go through and change people's barcodes. So with the Cornell ID barcodes, the last digit represents how many parts they've lost.
Missouri State thing is one.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny because students will come and say, "Oh, my ID number is this." Is I'm like, "No, that's what I confirm. This is your ID number." And then you're on your third part. Well, how do you know that? Because this number here says 3. So usually it's just the last digit that would think that.
Right.
But we did have. It was kind of nice with Voyager as it would go through different barcodes because the old ones were stored there and inactive. If they found their old ID and you swiped it, it would come up and say, this barcode is no longer active. This barcode was found that is active for this person. Do you want to use this one instead? And flip you over to the new account. Yeah.
So if you're let's say you're an absent-minded undergraduate and you lose your ID or your ID and you have to get a new one with a new barcode. And then being the absent-minded undergraduate that you are, you lose the new one, but you find the old one. And then you can come over and when it gets scanned, it's like, this is the old one. Do you want to switch to this one now? And the other one will become inactive.
It didn't deactivate the other one.
Oh, it does?
No, it was kind of, it would come up and just say, this barcode is inactive. We found this one on the patron record that is active. Do you want to switch to that barcode? And it would just literally dump out the barcode that you swiped and pop in the active barcode on the account.
Okay, so like in the checkout thing, you would just like, do you want to use the new one? Boom, it shows up. It does not activate your old card. It doesn't deactivate your new card. Yeah, it's awfully trusting.
I would reactivate the old one and inactivate the new one.
Well, the problem though is with that, though, too, you're getting a feed from like the bursar's office. They think the old one is still inactive, so as they come through the next night, it would just kick it back out again. So otherwise, I agree with you. Like I was like, okay, you found the old barcode, that means the new one must be lost. So
Right.
temporarily check it out on the old one and let it slip back.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I just see, I think, absent-minded undergraduate loses their ID, and then absent-minded roommate or absent-minded undergraduate's roommate's lousy girlfriend finds it and and then uses it to check out books.
Never happened.
Never happens. Never.
You don't look anything like this photo.
True. Okay, so we'll go back to the list here. Currently, there doesn't appear to be any way to protect fields when user records are updated. Is this your experience? This UX prod, this Jira ticket has been in the works for years. It's been sitting around. It is unresolved. I'm one of the people who advocated for this early on, because we will sometimes have to, sometimes if someone is a graduate student and a staff member, if their loans come through late, then they are considered not in good standing and their account is deactivated and they can't log in to Folio, or they can't, we found this with Olay, but they can't log in and they can't work, so they can't earn the money that would allow them to at least put in some earnest money on getting the money cleared up. So it was this terrible spiral, and I had one or two people just, fingernails in my forearm asking me, please, 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 can we fix this? And so we would have to do a thing where I would mark them active for a certain number of days. And that we would mark it so that it would not be overwritten by the campus feed. And then that can be, and then once that string of days is up, usually this thing has been cleared up. And so we don't have that kind of, so it's like a nice temporary thing, but if I had to do it every morning, then, none of us would be happy. And so, when user records are updated, if the record comes in and I see that, the system, the load sees that this marks the user as active, but it's inactive according to the feed, it will overwrite it. And then, and then we are all very sad. So I thought I would see if this has any traction for people. Thomas gives a thumbs up. And
I worked around it. By doing it in my data, my script that processed my data itself, I could protect the fields outside of Folio. It should happen inside of it.
so it should happen inside of Folio. So that's 2 counties heard from, and me.
I would even say at the UI level as well. Like you could, at the UI level, you could lock the patron record from that being able to be edited until you unlock it. And I know, like, if you can edit a patron record, you can block it, unlock it, but still, we've run into students could be true, it could
Right?
be a permission.
You could make it permission based, so
Yeah.
staff could log it and students couldn't.
Exactly. Because the issue that we run into is we just implemented Meetscan.
Right.
The username used was set2 for username, right? It follows the same pattern as in the IDs for Cornell. So when our patron fee came by, it was deactivated because it wasn't active.
Oh, poor SIP2.
Yeah, exactly.
Poor Meeskin.
And we also have another issue where, because we're part of SSO, we have a volunteer that was part of the Cornell community that no longer is. Their net ID is still active and they can use SSO. But because they are not registered with the university or no longer staff, they are deactivated every single night. So we need to figure out another way of giving them SSO access. So we can do that with guest IDs and 2 other things, but if we could just go in and say, lock this record from being edited, it would stop all updates.
Yes, yes. And, this UX prod JIRA ticket, I was just happy to have like certain fields that we could just not update.
This is really 2 separate issues, right? This is protecting the field across all of the records, but what Thomas is advocating is locking a specific record. It's really 2 separate issues, but they're both good issues.
So not just this, but also locking a user record,
Yes.
which actually would totally work for my scenario as well. This would be like, we were worried about custom fields too, so there was that, and not overwriting it because, oh, you're only allowed 17 custom fields. This one, I think, also ought to work there. There should be a way to load users from a document with delimited fields. And it would also help to have a UI to load users, preferably in a document with delimited fields. Yes, no, indifferent?
Yes.
Won't that be
Bulk edit.
bulk edit?
Yeah.
So is Bulk Edit doing that now?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sort of.
You can add users, update users, you can't change permission. I think it's very basic user data because they did some very small coverage of users and then jumped over to inventory because there's a higher demand for it. But that's actually something I've been kind of done more into my mind. Since you're talking about batch processing users, would it make sense to, I don't know what bulkhead is using in the background for its processes. Would it make sense to piggyback on bulk edits work, combine the batch user functionality into bulk edit. And instead of having as two separate processes, just have bulk edit handle this.
I think that's the way forward. The future of mod user import, it should eventually go away. And this should all be UI, which, I mean, there'll be an API behind it, but it should all be done through the bulk edit. Institutions should be able to load their own user records without having to jump through all the hoops that we have to jump through.
Yes, we've been on some meetings with the new Folio instance where when they've asked about how they're going to get users into their system, they said, well, our IT is going to give us delimited data of users and they want us to put it in the Folio.
Yeah.
And we said, okay, and then they said, well, how do we turn that into JSON? And it's like, okay. We need, this is like how do we load it?
We
It's
don't
like,
want them to load one record at a time.
yeah, the learning curve got steeper and steeper, and it's like something like this would be much more intuitive and helpful.
Right, it would be much more intuitive and helpful to have something like this. And personally, I think in the UI,
Yes.
I would be very happy with that. This notion of having to, access the APIs directly. I mean, that's what they do and we can do it and I'm all in favor of it. But at the same time, if we can encourage people to use the UI, and make it more intuitive and make it more useful, then I'm all the more in favor of that.
We have data import for all of the other important, you can data import EDI invoices, you can data import obviously inventory stuff. But users, which is a primary piece of what we do, there is no UI way to import that data. It's crazy.
Right. And
Yes.
right now, data import is trying to retool so that they can handle 50, 100,000 records at a time, or item records, which are a lot more complex than user data.
Right.
So,
Right.
I mean, that tool is kind of built around that. The first issue with being limited to 200 or 500 users, data import kind of already surpassed that limit because of the requirements from technical services.
So if we could find a way to adapt data import to users, to loading users.
Well, the bulk edit, I think, would do that. Honestly, I think bulk edit is still the way forward. Yeah, you could adapt data import. And there may be a use case for that, but I think you could do it with bulk edit.
The only reason why I say maybe data import could be better in some circumstances is I know right now when you're doing data import for item groups and instance records, you can set up matching patterns and rules to break down the more data that's coming in and how it's mapped. So if you wanted some functionality like that for the users, where you could just give it a file and say, no, I want you to take the email address, split it at this point. This is now the username, this is that, and you put some logic behind it.
You do need to do some mapping.
Yeah, so that's where data import might be a little bit better for it. But at the same extent, like bulk edit, my understanding of it is even though they're building it kind of from scratch, a lot of it is based on data import models. So have your cake and eat it too. I mean,
Right.
for very large batches of this data import where you need that logic on the back end. And then for smaller updates where you want to go through and deactivate or move somebody from one patron group to another one, then use bulk edit and do those changes out.
Okay. I've just closed the PowerPoint presentation because the last slide was basically saying that, the last slide was saying that, there was, that these were just the concerns brought up by Brooks Travis. And that if anybody had anything else, let's have it happen. And at the same time, I'm frozen on this screen. So I don't know how much the Zoomers have been getting out of this. But considering that we're coming up on 5 minutes left. Oh, good. Okay. Thank you, Art. So if we have any kind of, if we have extra things and if there are things we want to put, okay, thank you, Chuck. So if there's anything that you want to if the Zoomers want to add anything, or if there's anything that we discussed that you didn't quite pick up, I am totally happy to repeat myself or to repeat other people. You know, but otherwise, this is our chance to kind of wrap up, because it seems like using a delimited field, especially one for the UI, something we are all very much in favor of. So that would be part of the future. Part of the future should also contain the ability to protect full records, or at least some fields in the records, from the update. We should check if we can check our performance stats. But it seems to be that the problem Brooks ran into was a timeout issue. Or at least, you know, he not being here to defend himself.
So it gets.
How can he say, you know? So those were the big ones that I think we all are sort of together on.
I would kind of add, like, as part of my wish list, via the UI, if not just the API, the ability to batch update user permissions and service points. Should there was another one that was in there too. I want to be able to find by permission. Yes.
You mean list users by permission?
Yes.
Oh my God.
API.
What?
Yeah.
What a dream for me. Yes.
You know, how many times do you want to, I need to make this one like this person, or you know,
Yes.
who else has, who's in this department? Who do I match it with?
Right. Yes. Yes. Yes, Yana.
Yeah, I want to have a distinction between staff and patron.
Yeah.
Oh, you want to have a
Checkbox.
A checkbox, exactly.
Is his staff.
Can it be both? You know, I mean, can we have two?
Well,
checklists or two
Now,
checkboxes?
maybe Yana has a different idea, but so what I would do is if the staff is not checked, they can't get permissions, right? So they can still be students.
Mm,
But what the checkbox says is they can't get permissions. It also means I can pull up something and see all my staff without having to, you know, give them a different patron group or a custom field. You could do it with custom fields.
Absolutely, you can group in different ways, yes.
Right, but
We have a specific use case that I'm too tired and too.
It's too late in the meeting.
Yeah, but Ushi is in the user management. She will tell you all about it. Probably has already. I'm not sure. And yeah. But the distinction is important to us. And I think others too.
I think like in conversation that's happening in Slack with having a user record and then having a staff record and a patron record that were in long shoots of that. And even if they were held on the same data, but just kind of like data collections off of it, I think that would be cool. And that would help like address your concerns. I think that will see kind of wants to know the same thing. But also too is like I think it might also help with you could store a staff delivery address that might be their on-campus address. If they're in technical services, this is where the items go. But then they have a personal home address as a library user where you could send notices or notices and that sort of thing. So yeah, I kind of like that distinction between the two.
that's a good idea.
I was, you know, I was skeptical at first because I thought that we were talking about having a separate patron record and a separate staff record. And that looked to me like it was going to be a lot of work for me. And I'm not in favor of that.
Conceptually, this is real easy, right? I mean, it's literally just another field. It's either yes or it's no.
Or option 1 and option 2.
Right.
And then we would want to have the permission, the username, what else? So I mean, there could be. I mean, it would
Several
be a
differences.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It would be similar. How?
I think the one thing that you would have to see, and actually this would also solve the problem with the locked records too, is if somebody is considered a staff member, but their account is inactive, Are they still allowed to log into Folio? Because they could be an inactive patron, but they might still be an active staff member.
Right.
That's a good question. You know, an inactive patron, but an active staff member could, you know, then you'd have to decide, you know, which one is which, you know.
At MSU, that was done at the banner of the data came to us. If they were active in, you know, even because I am an inactive student, but I was also an active staff, and so staff trumped students.
Right. But I'm
So
thinking
would-
like, oh, sorry.
I was gonna say, would active anywhere trump inactive everywhere?
Or the other way around.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a black box. I didn't see how that data was collected.
Right,
And it
right.
might have to be on a tenant level, because I'm thinking more like the use case of like the volunteer that I have. Like when you were talking about the graduate students that aren't enrolled, so they come in inactive, we get
Mhm.
students like that too. They aren't fully enrolled because they have an outstanding burst or bill or something of that nature. They become inactive in Folio, so therefore they can't log in. So would having them marked as a staff override that inactive? Some units might say yes, and other ones say no.
Yeah.
If they're inactive,
There
they're
might be.
inactive.
Right.
You know,
Okay, so we've gotten the signal. Someone has come in and yes, as they open the door, but oh, somebody's still in here. So we're gonna wrap up. Thank you all so much for contributing and for sitting through the initial.
Well, thank you for being our PO.
I'll do it. So thank you, Chuck. And so we'll call it there. And if we want to continue this further, I invite people to come visit the user management SIG. So yes, exactly. Thank you all very much.